Winnipeg Jets had themselves a pretty eventful weekend of hockey, facing both the Buffalo Sabres and Arizona Coyotes at home on a back-to-back. And while one game, perhaps the Jets were a little bit lucky to get through and win, the second one was a masterful shutdown performance. We'll dive into all of that on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. As always, thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. But most of all, we just love and appreciate your support. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app and be sure to use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase when you make a brand new account. Now, like I said, obviously the Jets just had a very busy weekend, and they're not going to play for a couple of days. They'll next be in action on Wednesday, which obviously is a little bit of a time to wait. They'll be taking on the Tampa Bay Lightning, and then after American Thanksgiving, they'll have the Florida Panthers. So a bit of a Florida swing coming up over the next couple of days, and we'll talk about those games and what to expect later on this week. But obviously for the Jets, this past weekend was a bit of a wild and woolly one. Last Friday, the Jets opened their weekend set of back-to-backs with the Buffalo Sabres. And this game was an interesting one because this is one of the rare times where the Jets at even strength weren't all that great, and they sort of had to rely on Hellebuyck a lot, which is good because Hellebuyck was actually up to the task. I don't mean good in the sense that you want the Jets to do this, but certainly it's nice that it's rare that it happens, right? In past years, it used to be all Helly, and the Jets offense kind of had to scrape by with whatever they got, and Hellebuyck had to do the rest of the heavy lifting. This year, it's not really been that. If anything, Helly has actually been maybe a little bit below his standards, or a lot of it, depending on which game it is. But, just in general, the goaltending this year hasn't been the usual standard for the Jets. So Winnipeg winning games and doing so in the way that it is done has generally been because they're pretty darn good at even strength. So when they have a bad game, it's not typical. And the Sabres game was kind of funny because Winnipeg, first period was kind of Buffalo's way, right? Then the second period came in, and the Jets were very strong. I thought the Jets matched Buffalo's intensity stride for stride. Winnipeg created some great chances. You had the Perfetti goal. You had an Ehlers goal that was kind of fluky and sort of a strange one, if we're being honest. I don't even know if it was deflected or what off of a Sabres defender, but somehow Ehlers just sort of fired it from basically the blue line, and it just sort of floated in. A weird one, but certainly one that you'll take. And then for the next 25 odd minutes, the Jets basically got pounded. After the Ehlers goal, it sort of felt like Winnipeg stopped playing, which I don't know if it was intentional, because obviously the team knew that they had a big game the following evening against the Central Division rival. But either way, I'm sure that Scott Arniel probably wasn't thrilled with the team's perhaps lack of focus and performance, right? But at the end of the day, the Jets did enough to come away with a win. Hellebuyck made some stunning saves. Buffalo also probably got a little bit unlucky on some opportunities where you'd think they probably deserved a score, but thanks to a block shot or a last-second save, the Jets kind of escaped with that one. And that's what it really felt like, is Winnipeg escaped with that one. But like I said, it's not really been often that they've had to escape with wins. Usually when Winnipeg has beaten their opponents, it's generally been more in the convincing category. It's not often that I'll say that Winnipeg was lucky to come away with 2 points. The only times that I would say that that's been a case this year is with the Jets having a lead. Sometimes they've let things slip a bit. And there was a game against the Blues earlier this year where Winnipeg had like a 4-2 lead, and it got a little bit narrow towards the end of the game, if I recall correctly. But thankfully, the Jets held on, and it wasn't too much of a problem. So, it's rare that the Jets just lose at 5v5, but this was one of those games. And yeah, tough one, but thankfully, Hellebuck ended up being Winnipeg's best player on the night, and sometimes that's kind of what you need. You have to have your goalie pick you up when you are down. That said, I will say that it does kind of continue a trend that happened in the Devils game where the Jets did kind of get outplayed at even strength. And it's not great because, like, the Devils were down Heishier and Jack Hughes at the time. The Sabres obviously don't have Tage Thompson this time, and Tuck was just coming back from injury. Some of the stuff that the Jets conceded was a little bit sloppy. I think the Tuck goal in particular was one that Winnipeg's not going to love. And then Paterka had a number of like breakaways on stretch passes. So very strange game, honestly. You saw a lot of like, odd man rushes and breakaways, which I don't really know that I've seen so many in one game. I think Buffalo had like 2 to 3. Winnipeg had a couple themselves. Unfortunately, Kyle Connor couldn't bury one of his, but Paterka definitely buried his second chance, which was a tough one for Helly because Helly did get I think he got a pad or something on it at first, and then Paterka tucked the rebound away. So a tough one, but obviously the Jets still came out on the winning side of the ledger. I think the thing that probably would concern Winnipeg fans is that, Buffalo's game was very simple, right? A lot of speed, some skill, and the speed was kind of what really put the Jets under a lot of pressure. Obviously, Winnipeg would want to correct the stretch passes and stuff through the neutral zone. I think that was probably not something that they were particularly thrilled with. And I would say, the lack of back-end mobility was kind of a problem at times. I know that Logan Stanley came in for Nate Schmidt. Wasn't exactly the best of performances, but Schmidt really wasn't doing a lot either. So on the whole, the Jets defense kind of got cooked pretty good in that game. It is what it is. But I think the lack of offensive and puck moving options on the blue line continues to be something that's a little bit of a concern. But at least, Axel Janssen-Fjallby came in for Kupari, and, on the fourth line, I thought he filled in quite nicely. Had a couple of nice rushes. You could see his speed on icings. That's what AJF is really good for, is winning those icing battles, which is great because the Jets, apparently in the second game of the weekend, iced the puck a lot. That is a fun conversation that we'll get to in just a little bit. But obviously, big 3-2 win, it wasn't the cleanest, but sometimes you just have to rely on your best player to carry you through a game when you're not at your best. And Winnipeg very much got that from Hellebuck. One of the rare opportunities we've had to say that Helly did steal a game. So congrats to him, hoping he keeps it up, because if he is in form and if this team starts to get healthier soon, the Jets are going to be a real problem in a few months. If they make a trade for a top blue liner, things get even more interesting. But we'll talk about that at another time. For now, though, I wanted to shift the focus to the second game of the weekend, Winnipeg versus Arizona. We'll dive into that game in just a moment. Before we go any further, though, I do want to shout out our friends and partners at Game Time. When it comes to buying tickets, a lot of you are probably used to paying lots of money. And for some of you, that's not only the amount of time that you have to spend going through looking for the best deals, but also you get hit with lots of surprise fees. We all know how much a lot of those services charge, and let's be honest, you're almost paying double most times, which is a huge pain in the butt. Game Time knows your struggle and wants to help you out with amazing last-minute deals, flash deals, and lowest price guarantees. They have a great service that offers you all of the all-in prices and even an in-venue seat preview, so you know what you're actually getting with your money. You don't want to have to just guess and check when you're buying like $200 tickets. You want to make sure that the seat that you're actually looking at is what you're paying for and not some crappy view that's obstructed by a giant column. We've all seen that with the Red Sox stadium. You know how it is. You don't want to miss out on any action, whether you're watching the Winnipeg Jets or your favorite band in a concert. So if you're ready to take the guesswork out of buying tickets, go with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and be sure to use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Every day, thank you for joining us in tonight's episode as we are recapping a fun, action-packed weekend of Winnipeg Jets hockey. Before we talk about the second game of the weekend, Winnipeg versus Arizona, I just wanted to let you know about a really cool thing that the Locked On Network is doing. We have launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top stories from around all of the leagues and of the day with local experts from our network, plus, of course, our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Now, like I said, obviously Winnipeg versus Arizona, a very big game for the Jets because Arizona in the standings was actually a little bit closer than I think Winnipeg probably would have liked. The Central Division this year has kind of been a little bit strange in that I wouldn't say it's particularly strong in a lot of areas, but a lot of teams are clustered very close together. You've had, at various points, the Blues kind of catching up. You've had Colorado sort of hovering around where the Jets are. If you really think about it, the difference between first and eighth place is 13 points, which sounds like a lot, but when you think about the fact that there are 8 teams splitting up these standings points, it's not quite as big of a difference as I think it'd be, comfortable feeling, right? There are teams that are having, there are divisions that have much bigger breaks, like, the difference between first and eighth in the Pacific is like 21 points. That's, a little more than a win for that division, whereas the Central feels like it's very jam-packed. The top 4 teams are all split by 4 points, and Arizona is just now trailing that group by 1 point. So it's very tightly packed. There's not a lot of margin for error, especially if you're the Winnipeg Jets. And so this Yotes game, I think took on a surprising amount of significance. Not that this time of year is like necessarily one of those things where you have to be in a playoff spot, but like they always say, by American Thanksgiving, you'd like to be in a playoff position because at that point, you're starting to see what a team is. First 20-odd games, right, through the season, you're getting to be about a quarter of the way through your run, and you're starting to see what the team is made of. And I think with the Jets, we've started to get a much clearer picture of who they are, which is overall a pretty solid team, at times even really good. And I think those good times are only going to get better once Heinola and Velarde are both healthy and can start contributing regularly. If the Jets make some roster adjustments with maybe a big trade of some sort, things get even tastier. But obviously the Yotes presented an interesting opponent because, they've had a bit of a downturn in form recently, but they're still a very pesky team, and Winnipeg really couldn't go to sleep against this team. The couple of goals that they scored in this game, one of them was like a nice little tip. I missed the first one as I was out for the first period, but the second goal was kind of one of those weird rushes where I think somebody got burned on the blue line, and it might have been Connor, who wasn't really back checking, filling in for either Morrissey or DeMello. And, just a tip play that, quite frankly, Brissois never really had a chance on. So, one of the few opportunities the Jets gave up. But then after that, here's a crazy stat. From minute 33 on, the Arizona Coyotes did not record a single shot on goal. That's right, 27 minutes, no shots on goal. And it wasn't the kind of thing where you saw them missing the net. Winnipeg just straight up stone cold shut down the Arizona Coyotes for like half a game, which I got to say is really impressive. I don't care if it's a last place team in the league. To do that on the second half of a back-to-back, especially against a team that is in your division and that, you're essentially just shutting every single cycle game that they have, every passing lane that they have, every shooting lane that they have. You're closing everything off. That is immensely impressive. And Winnipeg did that in very emphatic fashion, all while scoring like 4 goals. So, this was a game where the Jets, quite frankly, earned every bit of it. A huge victory. There was even, I think, an empty net goal at the end, making it like 5-2 or something. Exactly what you want to see from the Jets. Although I would say this level of defensive dominance was something that even I wasn't expecting. What I thought really stood out was that, after during the second half of the game, right, the Jets basically just closed everything off. I thought that they pressured puck carriers well. They did it in all three zones of the ice. They forced turnovers. And when the Yotes tried to set something up in the offensive zone, Winnipeg immediately headed it off and created a counter out of it, even if they just dumped the puck, further up the ice, right? It wasn't one of the situations where the Jets were really taking a lot of big risks. They were basically just suffocating the life out of Arizona. And that was enough for this game. Winnipeg completely silenced them, muzzled them, and made the Yotes look very tame, which is not easy to do because, like Arizona, super annoying team to play. And like I said, they've had a pretty good record this year. They are only fifth in the division, and they're only trailing first by 5 points. So make no mistake, they're not an easy opponent. And their last stretch of games was pretty decent heading into this one. But thanks to the Jets having such a really impressive performance, Winnipeg basically snuffed the life out of their offense and just kind of coasted for half a game, which is really great, especially after a Sabres game where the Jets maybe weren't at their best. But this one, gotta say, full value for the 2 points, really impressive win. And it set up a nice little break until Wednesday. Obviously, the Jets won't play for a couple of days until they head down to Florida. So some time off, some time to rest, and prepare for what will probably be a relatively difficult test against a Tampa Bay team that is inconsistent, but still, very skilled and talented, and a Panthers team that has started to find its footing as of late. But of course, we still have to, wait a couple of days before we get into that. So in the meantime, I thought I'd talk about where the Jets are in the standings and their likelihood now, or very broadly speaking, not really diving into the statistical side of things so much as just sort of a general gut feeling about this. I want to talk about their playoff odds, right? Because this team is sort of in an interesting position of being good with a couple of key weaknesses that could be a problem down the road. But we'll get to that in just a moment. Before we go any further, though, I do want to shout out our friends and partners at Jace Medical. We spend a lot of time talking together, you and I. We get fired up together on wins and losses, who sits and who starts. I'm thankful for that connection we have, and today I want our chat to be a little more personal. I just learned that you can get a 1-year supply on ED medications. You realize what that means? Bring on extended travel, bring on the next natural disaster, or supply chain issues. No matter what, you're covered, my friend. You don't have to worry about whether or not you can fill your generics for Cialis, Viagra, or Avadio prescriptions. And this is possible because of our friends at Jace Medical. Go online right now at Jace Medical to receive your 12-month supply on your daily medication. Remember to use promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a discount as well. A verified customer had this to say about Jace. I'm thankful for the service. Supply chain issues caused me to cut pills in half just to save them. I ordered most of my daily meds with a year supply. I also ordered the antibiotic kit. I feel secure now. Prices are lower than my local pharmacies, and I highly recommend this for everyone. If you or someone you love would appreciate some peace of mind, get a year's supply of any daily med by going to jacemedical.com and seeing if it's offered for you. Remember to use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Every day, thank you for joining us on these closing thoughts as we finish out tonight's episode with some interesting thoughts on where the Jets are in the standings and how likely it feels that the Jets are going to make the playoffs this year, because this year's playoff field is actually pretty crowded. For being honest, the West is kind of all over the place, right? The Pacific is very much right now kind of like a 3-team race. You've got Vegas, Vancouver, and LA all competing for the top 3 spots. And then Anaheim and the Kraken are kind of like in the wild card discussion. But let's be real, right? It's unlikely that too many teams are catching the top 3. For Vancouver, I think their big question is, they've racked up a crazy goal differential. They've won tons of games. How much can they actually sustain, right? This is a team that over the years has not exactly been great. And I think with the Canucks, you do expect at some point that their 12-5-1 run is going to start to teeter off and tail off a bit as they kind of regress a little bit more to what you were expecting from this team. Still a pretty decent roster, but probably not second in the Pacific good, right? And actually second overall in the West good. Probably a little bit much. The Central is where things get very murky and very interesting. You've got Dallas, Colorado, and Winnipeg all within a point of one another in the top three spots. You've got St. Louis right behind this pack with 3 points back. Obviously, I think the front three here that we've got is probably what you're looking at for the top three divisional finish, barring a really big surprise. The Minnesota Wild, I would say, are the team that really caught me off guard as being bad this year. Their goaltending has, quite frankly, been almost unplayable. It's been so catastrophically bad that they're rocking a minus 16 goal differential on the year. They've conceded more goals than almost any other team. They're actually tied with Columbus and just 3 fewer goals conceded than the San Jose Sharks. And everyone pretty much agrees the Sharks are like one of the worst teams in NHL history. So if that's where you're at with your concessions, it's probably not looking ideal for the man in net. So for the Jets, right? They feel like a pretty safe playoff bet. If nothing else, like at least a wild card spot. I think that they're better than most of the teams that are going to be fighting for that range of positions. I really do think a top three finish for the Jets in the Central is very much achievable. I don't know that there's really too many teams that I'd worry about catching them. The only thing the Jets maybe have to be a little bit concerned about is whether the PK and the goaltending sort of normalize, right? The PK, I don't think, is really going to improve much this year unless they make some tactical adjustments. The goaltending, though, you do expect Hellebuck to start turning things around here over the next several weeks, perhaps even a month or two. Usually his start to the season is slow, and then like towards the first third or midway point, he's like really rolling and in like a Vezina contender sort of groove. And that's where I think we'll see with him over the next few weeks. But otherwise, the Jets don't really have a lot to worry about. For Winnipeg, I think getting up to this point, by American Thanksgiving, they've played well, generally speaking. They've outplayed a lot of their opponents for good stretches of the games that they're in. They haven't had a lot of wins where I'd say they got lucky. I think Winnipeg has just generally been a strong enough team to where we're seeing them cook, right? They're beating up on lower ranked teams. They're pretty much even with really quality opponents like Dallas. The only thing, again, that really separated them in that last matchup was just special teams. And that was, it is a big difference, right? Make no mistake, it's a big separation, but it's something that you can fix. And it's not something that you're like, oh, this is a problem that's going to be, through the rest of the year. The Jets can actually address the special teams and might even get some help once Velarde is back for at least part of it, right? So there's a lot to like with this team. And I think, getting to this point and being where it is, this team, it's a legit playoff contender. I think they're still a piece or two away from being a cup contender, but they're better than they were in previous years. They're still not quite on the level of like 2017, 2018. Obviously, that team had like a top-class blue line, and that was the big difference between this team and that team. That blue line was elite. This one, it's making do, right? Generally speaking, the Jets don't give a lot up to opponents, but the problem is that when they do give up chances, they're usually really high danger opportunities that come off of really bad mistakes. And those usually do get punished. So for the Jets, I think they really want to reduce the shot quality against, and having a more active mobile blue line would also help with some of their offensive production, which again, is pretty decent, but like it could be just a little bit better. And I think that's where the Jets are generally sitting, right? Is a really good team that could be better. So we'll kind of see what the Jets are up to and get a sense of what their trade deadline plans are. I think this team is really fun, and they could cook up something very special if they make the right acquisitions and moves. But we'll see what they do. Maybe they like what they've got. Maybe they don't feel that they have to make too many moves. We'll find out soon enough. Let me know what you think the Jets should do in the comments below. Give me your thoughts on any trade recommendations or perhaps tactical approaches that you think they need to employ in the comments below, or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's show, though, that is going to be all the time that we have. Thanks so much for making us your first listen of the day every day. We'll see you back here tomorrow for more Winnipeg Jets coverage, so don't go anywhere. Have a great night, and go Jets go.